Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of bills that are being worked on right now in the Idaho legislature. Actually, we'll talk about three of them. One of them has to do with repealing the grocery tax. We also will talk about legislative pay. This is kind of a touchy area because, on the one hand, you don't want to throw all the legislators under the bus, and on the other hand, some of them seem to really believe, man, we are worth more than we're being paid. And finally, we'll also talk just a little bit about the bill that would prohibit mask mandates from being instituted at the government's behest. This is a throwback to COVID. It's a throwback to some really ugly things that took place, and it may be a bill that you need to be paying close attention to. Anyway, details coming up in just a few moments.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. Let's dive right in. And thankfully, we have the Idaho Freedom Index to help us with some of these bills that are being looked at. Especially, I want to tip the hat to Parrish Miller, who helps to write up these ratings of the bills. And these are good, objective ratings. Does it increase or decrease the size or cost of government? Does it increase or decrease your liberty? We'll start with House Concurrent Resolution 4, legislative compensation. It's funny. This bill actually ends with kind of a cynical, by the way, if you're not in favor of adjusting legislators' pay upward, well, you legislators who don't like this, you can just donate what's excess of your salary to, the state tax fund or something like that. It's kind of like, oh, there's a little salt there. But here's what the bill is about. The bill description is House Concurrent Resolution 4 would accept and defend the 22% proposed legislative pay increase. Okay, now here's why it receives a -1 rating. Does it increase government spending for objectionable purposes or debt? Conversely, does it decrease government spending or debt? Well, in 2024, the Citizens Committee on Legislative Compensation proposed a significant pay increase for legislators, growing their base pay from $19,913 to $25,000. That's an increase of 25.5%. And when factoring in the additional compensation for constituent services and per diem reimbursements, the weighted increase is 22.1%. So the projected cost of this increase, $658 annually. Now, again, this seems like small change when you consider we're dealing with the budgets in the billions, but under Idaho law, the pay increase proposed by the committee goes into effect automatically, but the legislature has the authority to reject or reduce the rates of compensation through a concurrent resolution. House Concurrent Resolution 4 would accept and defend the legislative pay increase, referencing legislative pay in other states in a sad attempt to justify this increased spending. Here's the thing that I guess you kind of have to keep in mind. When it comes to economic downturns, we all feel it, right? There isn't a person within the sound of my voice who hasn't felt the pinch, either at the grocery store, when you're filling your gas tank, or you're just noticing that everything costs more. Money doesn't go as far as it should. Where does government get its money? It does not invest, even though it likes to use those words. It likes to spend, but it always can only spend other people's money. That's the only possible way it can get it. It doesn't create its own, and therefore, we need to be a little more circumspect when it comes to doling out raises to people who work within the public sector. Now, this is not to say that they should all be, making a pittance. What we're saying is, if the common people are feeling the pinch, government needs to likewise feel the pinch and scale back its costs, scale back its spending, rather than just, well, sure, we'll just throw more money at it and know that the taxpayers are good for it. See, there's an element of force here that nobody really wants to talk about, but it's there. Trust me. If you don't pay your taxes, you'll find out soon enough who's really in charge. So, at any rate, there's a great analysis. Again, you can check this out at idahofreedom.org. Right up there at the front of the website, it'll show you some of the bills that are under consideration. Here's another one. This is a big one too. Mask mandates and prohibition. This is House Bill 32. Why would we need such a thing? Okay, well, first of all, let me skip ahead one here. This bill would, with some exceptions, bar the state and its political subdivisions from requiring people to use medical face masks. Seems pretty straightforward. Note this bill is substantially similar to House Bill 493, which was introduced during the 2024 legislative session. So the first question we're going to ask, does it give government any new, additional, or expanded power to prohibit, restrict, or regulate activities in the free market? Conversely, does it eliminate or reduce government intervention in the market? Okay, well, let's dig into some answers and we'll see. House Bill 32 would create Section 67-2360 Idaho Code to prohibit the state or political subdivisions within the state from requiring any person to use a medical face mask, face shield, or other face covering for the purpose of preventing or slowing the spread of a contagious or infectious disease. Now, it also says a medical face mask, face shield, or face covering shall not be required by the state, a political subdivision, or an official as a condition for entry, education, employment, or other services. I think about Ammon Bundy getting arrested for failure to appear at his court date because he wouldn't put on the mask that the court was demanding. Well, this would prohibit that kind of a silly impasse from happening again. Finally, it establishes if a state, a political subdivision, or an official recommends using a medical face mask, face shield, or face covering to prevent or slow the spread of a contagious or infectious disease, such recommendation shall be accompanied by a notice that the recommendation is not mandatory. That's going to sting for some people, but it needs to be said. This provision could be improved by prohibiting governments from offering opinions on personal medical choices. Prohibiting government mask mandates will allow businesses to set their own policies for their customers rather than being required to enforce a government mandate. Now, some people are questioning, well, does that mean that these businesses can still have mask mandates? Yes. But they just can't go around as a government enforcer of mandates. In other words, government can't tell them this is what you need to do. It has to be their choice. Does it increase barriers to entry into the market? Examples include occupational licensure, minimum wage, restrictions on home businesses. Conversely, does it remove barriers to entry into the market? Well, history has shown that mask mandates effectively prevent people who cannot or choose not to wear masks from accessing the market and engaging in business. Prohibiting government mask mandates in Idaho will remove this barrier to participation in the market. And by the way, I don't mean to dredge old wounds open here, but do you remember how people were treated? Do you remember there was a willingness among certain people to actually round up the non-compliers and put them into camps? Yeah, I know. I don't like to remember it either. But my point is, some of the people who either put in motion those mandates or enforce those mandates are still very much where they can access the levers of power. These aren't people who can be trusted. They've shown you who their true color, what their true colors are. Don't make the mistake of trusting them one too many times. We also have the question, does it directly or indirectly increase or create penalties for victimless crimes or non-restorative penalties for non-violent crimes? Conversely, does it eliminate or decrease penalties for victimless crimes or non-restorative penalties for non-violent crimes? Now, in some places, there are laws that make failing to abide by public health orders or similar directives that can include mask mandates either an infraction or a misdemeanor. Prohibiting government mask mandates will protect people who don't wear masks from potential penalties. And the bright side of this, too, is it keeps the state focused on what it should be. That is, preserving and protecting and guaranteeing our God-given rights. We also ask the question, does it violate the spirit or letter of either the U.S. Constitution or the Idaho Constitution? Examples include restrictions on speech, public assembly, the press, privacy, private property, or firearms. Conversely, does it restore or uphold the protections guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution or the Idaho Constitution? Bottom line here, prohibiting government mask mandates protects individual liberty and self-ownership by allowing people to make their own choices regarding mask wearing. Now, House Bill 32 does contain a number of exceptions and carve-outs, some that weren't present in previous bills or similar drafts. So, first one is the explicit exclusion of any hospital or healthcare facility from the definition of state. What that means is, yes, these organizations may impose mask mandates, but an additional exception says nothing within this section shall be interpreted to restrict the requirement of a face mask in any vocational setting where the wearing of a protective face mask is a mandatory requirement and necessary to perform required job duties. The exemption in this subsection is simply limited to those working in roles where face masks are an integral and compulsory safety component of required job duties, which includes, but is not limited to, healthcare professionals, individuals working with hazardous or biohazards, or hazardous materials rather, or biohazards, and workers in industrial environments where respiratory protection is vocationally required. The bill also says nothing in this section may be used to restrict the use of face masks to address any behavioral risk in any facility to which an individual is confined, including hospitalization of the mentally ill pursuant to Chapter 3, Title 66, Idaho Code, and correctional facilities as defined in Chapter 1, Title 18, Idaho Code. So these exceptions reinforce the idea that government has the authority, at least under some circumstances, to overrule the individual choice not to wear a mask. Those exceptions undermine the principle of individual liberty, which should be the foundation of law. This is one that I hope people will get right. I hope that we'll keep a close eye on this and that we don't find ourselves tempted to fall back under that same, oh, well, everybody's afraid and everybody's thinking we should do this kind of mentality. All right, one final note. If you missed it earlier today, oh, it was so good. Capitol Clarity, featuring Senator Glenita Zeiderveld and also Senator Christy Zito, talking about repealing the grocery tax. Now, if you want to go to idahofreedom.org/media, you will find the latest episodes of Capitol Clarity right there. You can check it out on Rumble. You can check it out on YouTube, but it's easiest probably to go to the idahofreedom.org/media website, and that should get the job done for you. So there you have it. Just a few of the bills that we're following. This is just a tiny snapshot because we don't really have time to go into all of them, but keep an eye on these and any bills that you're looking at. Always weigh them against. Does this increase the size and cost of government? Does it increase or decrease my individual liberty? I trust that you'll know the right decisions to make based on some good criteria to judge it against. And thank goodness for people like Parrish Miller and the Idaho Freedom Index from the Idaho Freedom Foundation to help us to measure some of these bills and how they're doing. I'm Brian Hyde, but this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.